Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of The League of Biblical Enthusiasts. If you like our content, please share with your like minded friends and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe also to our Substack, where we have a repository of many resources available for further study. Today, in the League of Biblical Enthusiasts, we have a total of 5 series available for your content. A total of 82 longer form videos and 28 short form. First, we have the history of the English Bible, which includes many videos on Bible translations and discusses the translators and their qualifications, translation philosophy, and working procedures. We cover the likes of John Wycliffe, William Tyndale, Martin Luther, Erasmus, the Great Bible, the Bishop's Bible, the Matthew's Bible, the King James Version, the Geneva Bible, and more as well. We even cover modern versions like the ASV, Authorized Standard Version, the Revised Standard Version, the English Standard Version, the NIV, and on we could go with these acronyms. But we also include some single author translations like the Moffat Bible, E.J. Goodspeed's translation, Kenneth Taylor's Living Bible, Richmond Lattimore's Gospels, the Cotton Patch Gospels, and others. A second series features manuscript hunters and collectors, with episodes featuring Robert Curzon, Constantine Tischendorf, the Sisters of Sinai, Solomon Schechter, and many more. In addition, we discussed collectors such as J. Pierpont Morgan, Charles Freer, Chester Beatty, Martin Bodmer, and our third series on cities of the New Testament. And today we have covered Jerusalem, Nazareth, Capernaum, Bethsaida, Cana in Galilee, and Caesarea Philippi. Our fourth series, which is rather new, is archaeologist interviews. And our first was with Dr. Thomas McCullough, director of the Khirbet Kana excavation. Today we introduce our fifth series, and I call it Books in My Library. We summarize, you learn. Now, if you've ever wondered what the land of the Bible looks like today, you live in very fortunate times. The average middle-class person can save up for a trip to Israel and see the sights for yourself up close and personal. If not, then we have high-resolution satellite images. We have high-resolution still photos and videos that many people around the world take on a daily basis. We have YouTube walkthroughs where people walk through the streets of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Tiberias, and many more. You can just saturate yourself in the knowledge of the topography and what the land of Israel looks like today. But what if you lived in the year 1800 in England? This, of course, is a time before photography, and most people would have never had the opportunity to visit the Holy Land. The infrastructure that we enjoy today, planes, trains, and automobiles, wasn't in place then. Long-distance travel was expensive, difficult, and often dangerous. In those days, your main source of information for the Holy Land would be from your own imagination as you read through the stories of the Bible and pictured in your mind for what example the wedding in Cana in Galilee might have looked like. Perhaps your local preacher would paint a verbal picture in one of his sermons. The average Englishman at this time had little recourse to study Italian Renaissance paintings, and even if he could, those beautiful works of art focused very little on the geography of the land and were stylized romantically for medieval dress. In short, the land of the Bible, notably Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and Jordan, was a mystery to most Westerners at this time. In 2019, Israel saw a record 4.5 million international visitors. So, what happened between 1800 and today? What set of circumstances led to the rediscovery of Palestine for the West? Well, for starters, of course, Napoleon's 1799 expedition to the Holy Land marked the beginning of European interest in the region. But there's so much more to the story. And our focus in this episode is the wonderful book by Naomi Shepherd entitled The Zealous Intruders, The Western Rediscovery of Palestine. And the subtitle is From Napoleon to the Dawn of Zionism, the Explorers, Archaeologists, Artists, Tourists, Pilgrims, and Visionaries Who Opened Palestine to the West. Now, there are many other good books on this subject. One in particular I recommend is right here, if you can see it, Yehoshua ben Aria, The Rediscovery of the Holy Land in the 19th Century. It covers some of the same material, but today we're going to focus on Naomi Shepherd's book, which is very interesting. It has 20 illustrations and pictures, I think 10 chapters or so. An excellent writer, an excellent scholar, very well researched. And so it was published by Harper & Row, 1987. Actually, it has 8 chapters. The bibliography contains both published and unpublished sources. So, who is Naomi Shepherd? Well, here's the younger Shepherd on the left and a more current photo on the right. Naomi Shepherd was born in Cardiff, Wales, brought up in London. She's a graduate of Oxford University and taught in the Department of English at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where she resides today. Dr. Shepherd has worked as a political correspondent for the New York New Statesman. She's contributed to the New York Times and is a documentary screenwriter. Her many books on Jewish and Israeli history include A Price Below Rubies, Jewish Women as Rebels and Radicals, and Plowing Sand, British Rule in Palestine from 1919 to 1948. Our book, The Zealous Intruders, opens this way. Palestine at the end of the 18th century had been almost terra incognita. It had no political frontiers but the shifting historical tidelines of biblical, Roman, and medieval conquest. In political terms, it was merely a part of the Ottoman Empire of province of Syria, administered by the governors of Acre and Damascus. European traders frequented the ports, but the interior of the country, save for Nazareth, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem, was scarcely visited. Palestine was not even familiar as a place of pilgrimage. By Napoleon's time, the tradition of Catholic pilgrimage was moribund. Only a handful of Europeans were to be seen in Jerusalem during Easter week. They were vastly outnumbered by pilgrims from the Eastern churches, Greek Orthodox, Armenian, Copt, and others. What the Napoleonic campaign had done, however, was to remind the West of the physical reality of the Holy Land. Palestine was now to be rescued from obscurity and made the focus of romantic and religious expectations. Among the first 19th century antiquarians to visit Palestine that Shepherd mentions is Edward Daniel Clarke, who was the first professor of mineralogy at Cambridge. He arrived at the port of Acre in 1801. The modern name is Akko in Hebrew. Here's the city, the modern city shown here with the ancient port in the foreground. And he paid compliments right off the bat to the governor of the region, Jezer Pasha. Shepherd notes that Clarke's company now set out to explore Palestine with an escort of soldiers provided by Jezer, something only accorded to important travelers. An escort was essential as Palestine had no roads and maps were unavailable. The first modern map of Palestine, drawn by Napoleon's cartographer Jacotin, became available only after the war. Neither bedding, food, nor firearms could be purchased in the countryside, so that everything was carried by pack animals, camels or donkeys. For horses were scarce. In Palestine, as throughout the Levant, there was not a single wheeled vehicle, and the party traveled holding umbrellas against the blazing sun. But Jezer's soldiers at least protected the party from the ubiquitous marauders. Shepherd describes Clark's revulsion to the petty rivalries of the Christian sects in Jerusalem, who zealously guarded their own coveted holy sites. And she writes, when the different sects celebrated their rites in close sequence, fights broke out, and warring priests sometimes damaged or removed their rivals' carpets, candlesticks, paintings, or altars. Sometimes they attacked one another with candelabra and incense burners. Clark did not believe that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was the true site, and he used the few days that he had in Jerusalem to try to locate it. His curiosity served to reawaken Protestant scholars in the West to reconsider studying these sites in the future. Next up in Shepherd's catalog of 19th century visitors is the French writer Chateaubriand, who arrived in Jerusalem 5 years after Clark. Chateaubriand documented his trip in his wildly popular Itinéraire à Jerusalem, which probably was the most widely read book on Palestine in the early years of the 19th century. It went to 12 editions by 1814. His was a romanticized view of the land. Shepherd notes that he praised the Crusaders, saw Napoleon's armies as heirs. His Palestine was a country peopled by martyred noble monks, Bedouin fallen from a former civilized state, and Jews apparently waiting for their Messiah. Shepherd also notes the early accounts of those who saw firsthand the most notorious ceremony of the Christians in Jerusalem, the ceremony of the Holy Fire. One was a young British diplomat named William Turner, who arrived in Jerusalem in 1816. There he saw what he described as the most extraordinary scene I've ever beheld during my 22 years of life. Shepherd summarizes what the young diplomat Turner witnessed. A janissary, and that's a member of the Turkish infantry, with a leather whip opened the way into the church for 7,000 pilgrims. Within the church itself were stalls selling bread, fruit, vegetables, beads, and crucifixes. And the pilgrims, hallooing, shouting, and singing, struggled for a good vantage point near the sepulchre while the Turkish soldiers drove them back with their whips. One man, Turner observed, had his right ear cut off, while some pilgrims rode on others' shoulders. Now, we have covered the ceremony of the Holy Fire in an earlier episode featuring Robert Curzon, who also witnessed it during his visit in 1834, in which he reported there was a stampede that killed hundreds that day. There are two sites holy to Muslims in Jerusalem, and both sit atop the noble sanctuary, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Popular sentiment forbade access to the sanctuary by non-Muslims. It was rumored that any trespasser would be forced to convert to Islam or lose his life. But this didn't stop some from trying. Shepherd describes a story of one who succeeded. It was 1818, and it was a woman, Mrs. Sarah Belzoni, wife of the famous Italian architect Giovanni Belzoni, who had restored some of the ancient sites of Egypt. Mrs. Shepherd, quote, managed to get herself smuggled into the precincts of the sanctuary in the disguise of a man. She blundered around the Dome of the Rock a couple of times and finally entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque, where, detected by an alert bystander, she made her escape by a back entrance leading down from the walls of the mount, leaving her shoes behind. Now, she wasn't the last to try this stunt. Others succeeded over time. And that's an interesting story in itself. But Shepherd notes that until 1817, scientific explorers and romanticists had dominated Western interest in exploring Palestine. But soon enough, religious interest began. The first of many Protestant missions began in 1823 with the arrival of English and American missionaries. William Jowett was the first Anglican clergyman to volunteer for mission work on behalf of the Church Missionary Society, which was founded in 1799. Jowett visited Jerusalem in 1823 and was also disappointed in the infighting and rivalries among the various Christian groups. Shepherd notes that it was the New England Congregationalists, with their puritanical ethos and fundamentalist energy, who were to provide the Protestant vanguard. The first two missionaries sent out were Pliny Fisk and Levi Parsons, both of whom naively believed that they would be successful in converting many Muslims to Christianity. They were sorely disappointed. But all was not lost. In 1831, Egypt conquered Palestine for almost a decade, and under their rule, Palestine attracted scriptural geographers and a host of other Bible scholars and clergymen bent on authenticating the text of the Bible. Well, in our next episode, we will pick up with chapter 2 of her book that describes some of the great early 19th century explorers, among them Ulrich Seetzen, Jean-Louis Burckhardt, and James Silk Buckingham. I hope that you are enjoying this book summary. This new series is kind of a test for me, and I'm very curious as if you think it's worthwhile continuing with summarizing and reviewing books of interest to biblical history, biblical interpretation, biblical archaeology, and many other subjects. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Again, if you like this content, please subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our Substack as well, where we keep a repository of sources for each episode. Until our next time, stay healthy, keep curious, always learning, and we'll see you soon in the next episode of The League of Biblical Enthusiasts.